for illumined life to be birthed into form. I am the truth. I am the light. Illumined, beloved divine. So hello there everyone, and welcome to this 2021 video with me here today. I know it's been a long time no see, but I was going through severe challenges, as you know, in my physical body, as in relation to everything that I've already shared with you in the past few videos. So it is the new year, and this year was very different because unlike all the previous years, no matter how difficult and challenging my life has become, I've still been celebrating in a while. And this year, well, before this year began, I didn't celebrate nor Christmas nor New Year. I actually spent the last few weeks in that previous settlement in a very poor condition, barely staying alive. So what took place exactly on January 15th, we had to vacate those premises and we had to move again for the sixth time. You can imagine that in a little over half year, which is not entire year, so it's less than a year, and we had to move so many times. There was so much persecution of the Christ. There was such rigorous attacks in all ways and means possible to prevent what I'm calling, and I've been calling for so many years now, the unification of timelines into the unified Christ timeline, that many of our lives became rather difficult, and especially mine because of what I do and what I am, or who I am. I've received a very interesting message actually from beloved Jesus the Christ, who said that in actuality those who carry the most difficult missions, that are light being missions, operatives on this planet, we will have to remain hidden, because otherwise we'd be in dire danger. You know, we already are being attacked from levels of the unseen, which oftentimes in this world we call the unseen enemy. But somehow this would perpetuate even further. So I know there's a reason why, in a way, I've always lived in these kind of remote locations, but until the last few months, it hasn't really felt good, you know, to stay where I was. It got too dark in energy, too many people with greed and very dark energies coming, and it was just getting out of hand. I have to be honest with you, it's very difficult for me as a human being right now, as a light being incorporated in this human body, in this vessel, to live, to continue living like this, because I've basically lost everything. And what meant the most to me was my homeland. Because as you know, those of you who've been with me for years, I've spent most of my time outdoors. I'm not like most people who, you know, they still are kind of used to this indoor dwelling, and I'm not. I feel a tremendous sense of losing vitality and life force when I'm in indoor enclosed spaces. And this even further escalates when things like what have been performed on me and my physical body are perpetuated, and what I had to experience. So there is good news at the end of the tunnel. I know that my challenge now remains to not be attached to not even this connection that I used to have with what I call my homeland and the pristine nature of that place. Because that place, as beautiful as any place, there's different locations on the planet, they're really beautiful. And each have their own frequency, each have their own kind of alignment and a creation, kind of what puts it aside from the rest, which makes it unique. And I felt so good in that place for so many years, but it was interesting to realize how the last few months and let's say the last 3 years, the place was becoming also hijacked in so many ways, and I absolutely had to leave. This still breaks my heart because I don't feel the way I used to feel before. I have to be honest. I got a lot of my inspiration in my solitude moments out in nature, and being precisely in that space of nature and so close to the mountains, which I now no longer have. It's been a struggle for so many months to keep on moving like that, and not a lot of people know that, but the silent or hidden enemy, which although we don't see it, it's always there. It lurks among all the materialistic aspects of this reality, of this space of existence, in this, what I call this hub, this web, this grid. And it's like it knows all of us, all of our thoughts, all of our intentions, all of our desires. So as you know, this enemy, it has many names. I often call it different names as well, but in most cases, it is the Antichrist intelligence. It is the lifeless intelligence. Is that which bypasses the God code, right? The Trinity of life principle. And those of us who hold this principle of life know and understand how difficult it is to be in this plane of reality, to not be constantly, not just censored, what's happening nowadays in our current public arena with the information coming out and a lot of people speaking the truth and truthers and truth movements. But what we are experiencing, those of us who are directly descendants of the lineage of the Christ and are performing the continuation of the work that was initiated by our beloved Jesus, the Christ, and we continue this path, our persecutions are even worse because they come from the highest echelons of light. We say the light, right? We don't say the dark in that sense. I oftentimes notice myself saying that because we often think it's the dark. But what we know and see unfolding on our planet right now as this darkness that has a firm grip has a different equivalent of that. And it's still light, except it's a different reality of what we know to be a source light. So it is, in a way, a light intelligence. It's, however, quite a different intelligence. So as I was sweating behind the scenes, I wasn't enjoying what most people think when you're absent for such a long time. You're enjoying or somewhere you're not doing anything. I was working full time, just not in the format and in the way of expression that I did before all those years when I was publishing all those videos. And I didn't know my life that it would become so difficult and so tremendously to a fault complex. However, as you know, complexity is not a nature of God, of divinity, of source. Complexity is instilled. It's injected. It's an inception. So fighting this complexity, which is in a way superseded upon us, it's like superimposed upon us, it's a very difficult task. And as I was putting all my sweat and tears, behind the scenes into this work of moving through this archonic grid system and the web that they're trying to superimpose upon this human plane of existence and the planet in itself, trying to hold all of this beautiful intelligence kept in this and captive in it, and in a way also embed their own consciousness into it, which is a very complex topic you can't do in one video. So there's so much to talk about, and yet today is only a precursor video, a general 2021 video with sort of presentations of the issues, challenges, perspectives, and potentials that we're all facing with, that we're going to continuously be facing this year to come and beyond, okay? So I will be disseminating all the other things that I've been putting into this work, truly blood and sweat all the way, and much of what I call body sickness. And as you can see, I don't look as I used to before. Even my eyesight is not the best. It all affected my body tremendously. And in a way, it has been the most difficult thing to experience in the past 3 years, and especially in the last few months. What I had to undergo, one breakthrough through those codes that I had to crack, that my light intelligence had to move through, and then the human body needed to experience, and it was one thing after the other. It was like I was given no break. I didn't sleep like a normal human person for a year now. I don't often talk about this, but the insomnia has been tremendous. This was just absolutely abnormally disgraceful in a way, because this is an abomination of God. This is a total disgrace to what is natural organic Christ intelligence, is the pure essence of life, and everything that works in this system to oppose it and to go against it, and instead to continuously perpetuate the narratives of the anti-Christ movement or the antichrist, or what we call often the AI as artificial intelligence, which is not. For me, it is the anti-intelligence. It is not just artificial, but it is anti, which means it's everything but intelligent. And it is cold, and it is devoid of life, of compassion, of love, of everything that makes humans humane. So a lot of the problems that humanity is facing, they're actually instilled from the outside realm. So it was interesting for us to work on our inner fears and inner demons, as a lot of this spiritual work has been promoted as. And it's good and it's beautiful to know your shadow and to work with the shadow, to have the understanding. But there is no better advancement of what we're moving towards than truly understanding how darkness works and all these principles, which are basically initiations we have to move through as human beings becoming illumined beings. Right? So we're not just human beings. We've always been birthed through this beautiful expression of illumination, through these beings that they're simply almost like a replication of Source. They were in the first initial burst of Source intelligence. They became as Source itself, so they began to emanate life in their own way, and this is what natural intelligence does. While the artificial intelligence, or the AI construct, which is the anti-intelligence, just wants to reproduce life, changing and modifying aspects of it, which we now also know as DNA modification, which is becoming very popular now with the word we almost now can say, as you know, the great V word. We're kind of prohibited in saying, because as you know, there's so much censorship among so many. This is not just that, but it's also the specific correctedness, this and that kind of correctedness you need to use in our speech. Basically, it's not a form of being correct. It's a form of being totally controlled, and our freedom is basically at stake here. And nonetheless, as you know, I've been speaking about AI since probably for the last few years, and still I did not know it was going to get so intense, and that the issues are going to be so trialing and so difficult to undergo, because my human being has been gradually unveiling what the light being has been moving through me, and the challenges coming with that. But what I'm feeling is that, and what I received directly from my own Illumined Council Light team, is that this was basically an impulse that I came here to perform as a sacred act of grace, a divine dispensation of grace, just like beloved Master Jesus in his own timeline. He initiated something very specific that was a part or an act of dissolving this archonic grid and its influence upon humanity. I'm going to talk about them a little later towards the end, and I know they're becoming rather an interesting focus of my videos, and I know they're watching and listening because they're simply everywhere and everything, because they are pure mind intelligence. And this is why I know in the spiritual communities it's become so important to instigate any form of meditation practice that opens us up to this sense of void, of truly unplugging from what we call the system of the mind, which has been in science, portrayed to us. It's just an element of brain activity. It's nothing else. But in truth, it's a broad spectrum of receiving and emanating codes. And most often, these codes were brought into the human sphere of life. There was a mind was an inception of these higher ranking beings that wanted to put gradually through each cycle of creation more and more of themselves, like embedding themselves in what we know as the human creation, or I call it the human design, because in many of the ancient works and scriptures and understandings, even the word creation is not truly what describes the intelligence of God or Source. Because Source simply emanates light, right? It's an emanation of light, and it's also how illumined light beings function, and how life force dispensation and intelligence actually occurs, and what it is. While in this totally different narrative, this creation is more like a replication. That's why, we know terms as creationists and the creation law. And these always take samples of something that was before. Look at the examples of our human creation. Humans existed in this way, and they're always being modulated and reframed and, splicing up our DNA and changing the human genome in whatever way best fits the needs and the narratives of those who are basically the overseers, the overarching aspect of life. So when we say overarching, and basically what the arc also means in the word archon is that they're the overseers, they're the gatekeepers. When you know yourself as an intelligent being, right, you don't need gatekeeping. You don't need someone to stand and say, no, you can't pass. You choose freely. And basically in divine intelligence of God, of source, it's already inscribed what moves with what. So we don't need someone to moderate and kind of monitor our evolution and the evolution of souls as they used to for such a long time. I don't know how many of you know this, but the whole thing with the white light at the end of the tunnel, it's a joke, and there are people there and family who are meeting you at the end of the gate, so you know where to go. But in actuality, it's like a rehubbing. It's a reincarnational center and cycle, which basically cuts off any ability for you to choose yourself and say, I instead want to go home. Not a lot of people know about that, but I know about that concept since many years ago. I think I've even mentioned it a couple times. There's a lot in those teachings, and they predate what we know as the ancient Christianity, and they go all the way back to gnosis, which means knowledge, wisdom, that which was given since the beginning, which was given to humanity to understand about itself and its evolutionary stages and what it's necessary in its process of self-mastery and liberation, in what we sometimes know as, and now modern propaganda of the words, the times of revelation or the end times, right? So it looks like it is true that we're now somehow finding ourselves to be in those times. And we all know how much was known and spoken about tremendously this year holds a major importance, 2021. It's actually a reversal of the year 2012, which was presented back then as the year of the major shift. But in many cases now it's coming out that it was basically a hoax. It was a reversal, and the mainstream did not want humanity to realize about the importance. So we would think, well, that already happened and not much changed, so we're screwed, basically, right? We're all doomed. But it's not like that. There's so many things that we don't yet understand until we actually delve into a deeper discovery of the self, of this reality, what is beyond this reality we can just see with our visible eyes and, our basic five senses, and what's beyond. And for me personally, I know this was the most difficult experience in my life, and it still is, because I'm still in continuation of the healing and illumination of the body process. But it actually gave me so much because I needed to go through, and my human being needed to pass through those things for the illumined being within me to actually install these breakthroughs through me, to actually perform them. Otherwise, I'd just be, like everyone else with the status quo. Because imagine me and my sharing a couple of years ago, and look at where we are now and where I am now and where I'm leading the narrative into. For those of you who are willing to listen, because let me tell you, there's not a lot of people right now paying attention to that. There are several reasons for that. One might be that people are not ready. The second part is that there's still a lot of disorientation of humanity, a lot of confusion and misconception, and constant pulling away of our attention into narratives that are not as important, truly, for us. Okay, we're going to talk about that later too. But for me, knowing what I had to go through and seeing what's on the other end and realizing that basically this was the most major part of my purpose, if I was to perform the pathway, the gateway unlocking of what the Illumined team calls the golden gates of ascension. And I won't talk about it here as much as I will on Patreon, because as you know, I've been talking about this so much before. Patreon is my work of specifically Christ embodiment and Illumined Ascension that I don't go here as much in these general videos. But this is the year for me that I am restarting my work. You can expect more from me as I can, because I'm still in a very vulnerable phase in my life, and I'm feeling that until this March equinox this year, we're still going to be in that in-between period. But after that, we don't know. Much is open for possibility, and we'll see. Our body needs to be our priority now, not the mind. And for me specifically, in a way, this was such a major blessing, because even very, very advanced beings, when they come and when they're incorporating this human body, we all fall prey to the mind. We're all not always necessarily with awareness, but we become instilled in practices that basically put a lot of life force still into the activities of the mind, and we're developing the informational database, but it's actually just making that available to those who thrive on that. And we're not putting so much focus on our heart, and the community is built through the heart, which is the first inner communion that comes through us through the source, our sovereign God, divine self, the spark of life, the eternal principle of Father, Mother, and the Christ as the child, and the Holy Spirit is the breath of life, which means the active ensoulment, that we have soul. And a lot of people might say, why are there such horrors happening right now on our planet, and those instilling them? Is not a lot of people know that these are not necessarily, the forces of instigation of that, they're not necessarily human or humane in that turn. They don't have what we call ensoulment and the soul. And they have been perpetuating this spiritual warfare for eons of time. This is not new, but what's happening now is you can see things coming and being revealed, and beyond the mask, things happening, and it was always predicted to be so in the end times. However, unfortunately, that part of the Bible, which was referenced as the end times and the Revelation prophecies and the mark of the beast and the fall of the demonic entity we know as Satan or the devil, and the coming, once again, the return of the Messiah, or what we know as Jesus the Christ. But in many cases, so much was left out, and there was so much that was not presented there, which was, again, a limited narrative presenting a focus on that, still the ruling of this dark entity. And it's not just one entity. It is everything that makes life anti-Christed. It is everything that creates a life living in fear, and eventually shrinking the amount of love to the extent where we feel lifeless. So it's like this intelligence, instead of promoting life, being pro-life, it just takes more and more of life force, which is the essence of life, which is the essence of Christ, the beauty of life. And it just wants to kind of, there's a narrative in one of the scriptures, I don't know now, there's a narrative now that even Satan, in a way, wants to know God. That means that the fallen aspect of life wants to return back to the source. And so it creates these things almost like to see the mirror of things becoming and, being reflected back. However, the problem is that when the humanity is not aware of what is happening, it is actually just perpetuating the existence of the same, of the status quo. And we still don't have that which was, let's say, envisioned as the coming out of that sacrifice, right? And knowing that the source that simply emanates life is pro all life, even that life which has become, in a way, like a fallen aspect. So there's two things we need to discern between here. One is that the life that has a specific way in its trajectory of its evolution has fallen, which means it's falling into sleep, a forgetfulness state. But it originated life as pure source creation. And we have to know about the aspects of life that have already began as pure artificial intelligence, just building up more on that, right? So I will prepare a special course on the keys to unlock the archonic imprints, constructs, implants, and grids within our own body, because that's, the most important vortices that through which this is coming through into this reality, and how it's hijacking our consciousness, because it's changing the way we see our reality. not just, you know, reality itself. It doesn't change because it's not physical in itself, but that's how it influences this sphere of reality. And when humanity isn't aware and they don't know, they just continue that status quo. So it's not enough to just base our reality upon a few scriptures and narratives we've been given. Like, again, we can still be like this, right? The different frames of work that were given or offered to us, in many ways, they were like breadcrumbs. But we need to be the intelligence that deciphers those. We need to be the wisdom that gets to unlock the codes on our own. And for me, that was the process of returning my body to the Christ after it was intervened with and transgressed and put into almost like the state of total abomination against life. Because even what my own light family has told me, they said, what's happened to you, it cannot even be put into words. It's that vile. It's horrendous. And still I'm here and I survived. And I wouldn't have survived if it wasn't for my team. And I'll talk about more this in that mini course I'll create about these keys. Because what I see is that unlocking this is unlocking the true nature of knowing what the spiral of life is, and once again unplugging for this gridding system and resurging ourselves back into life. So even what I received for this year as the keyword, it's like God calls this year the year of resurgence, right? This is like the return into life. It's not like just the birth of life itself. The birth is always there, but it's life that has been put through a tremendous amount of dissociation with life, and then at a certain point coming to that point of resurgence, like re-emerging back into life. So yes, everything is changing. It appears to be, and there's a lot of things we might see on the surface that are not as they appear to be to us or for us. God gave me these words when I prayed this year to have a little bit of the information about what's happening, because I'm with the events of the world, and I have been, especially because I was bedridden for so long. So that gave me time to explore and connect to what's happening behind the scenes. And I've been uncovering and digging up so much dirt, and you can't believe how the evil of the evils of the evil in this world, you know. And I know some of you have done the research yourself, some of you have not. I think it's important to know exactly what's happening without putting so much of our investment of the details, because again, that turns us away from our work, which is continuing with our work of Christ's light intelligence within our bodies, because that continuously emanates the light. Instead of absorbing so much of the information in that state, we can't emanate as strongly. It's like the light is pulsating in a minimum instead of doing like this, these intense bursts of light. So going back to, I have a few notes prepared here. As you can see, my narration was pretty long, but I do have some notes, which are the things I want to mention. Although, you know, this is just a general video, and I will create, I don't know whether it will be in one piece or in general, the dissemination of that. But as you know, the work of how to move through, this will be just the information about what's happening, but the work of light intelligence and how to move through, and all in depth, as I will continue sharing on Patreon, which is my work called Illumined Ascension. For those of you who feel this year might be the time to join, please do so, because it is such time. The work has to start. A lot of people think, and this is a specific manipulated New Age inception, which is, oh, we're going to be picked up, or we're going to ascend, and these waves of cosmic energy will just come and change us. You know, it's like you can't do that if the vessel is not prepared. It's like if the vessel is pulled with these strings, you can have whatever kind of thing beaming at it, and it has no effect. So we all need to walk through this year of liberation. The liberation has to continue. God told me through my recent resurgent experience that I'll share in the course, is that the torture continues. The torture continues, as well as the rebellious nature of many souls who are feeling these impacts on their own bodies. They're becoming aware of what's happening, because these entities, they're like huge. You know, we don't meet them directly or personally, but they're influencing us through several of what sometimes we call minions at different levels of realities. And they will get more and more embedded and hooked into our own reality, eventually into our bodies. And so for different people, this will be a different experience. And again, I'll talk about that in the course. However, it is important to know, because again, let me rephrase that, one of the most important epiphanies to always live with in our consciousness, which is that what you can't see has the affinity and the ability to control you. It doesn't mean that if you don't see it, it's not there. Like, I didn't know about these things for the most major part of my 10 years of doing this work, but in the last few years it was getting very downward obvious what's happening. And the important part in my life is that I was also waking up in the middle of those transgressions that were supposed to be completely numbing me down, and I was not supposed to be aware of it, because the technology is there, it exists for you to not awake and remember anything. But what's happening with these waves of cosmic energy, they're helping us to be more anchored and to get our memory back and to have a full epiphany into what's happening and to have a full insight into our bodies, which will make us more intelligent into how we seed the anchoring process in our bodies. Just like what I explained, when we're living as a nomad all the time, keep on moving, we don't have that strong anchor, right? As beautiful as the experience might be, someone keeps on moving and moving. They have no sure-footedness, which means it's not the same as the security issue. This is simply an issue of, if you are doing the work of Christ, you need your pillar. You need to know what it is. You're going to need to have a specific routine and anchoring process and centering, because that's the work. It is no other way. I know it sounds difficult, that why, if we were created this way, right, as these beautiful beings, why this is not just naturally occurring through us, just by us, having that sharp focus and intention, and then everything automatically happens. First of all, because our bodies have been so majorly transgressed. Second of all, because most people don't even know, so they can't use that sharp focus and attention, and that cannot happen automatically because they don't even know what's happening, right? And there's probably other reasons too, but a lot has been done with the specific manipulations of our body in the times past. And, just when humanity is before a pivotal breakthrough, and it's so close, the status quo, or the status that be, or the energies that govern or wish to be on top of things, which are the evil transgressors, like ancestors of the fallen ones, what we say, the fallen angels are no longer here. They all have their offspring. They all have their extensions, just like I believe all of the light family does as well. So it's all a beautiful pool and mashed together, and it's different things playing out. However, the most important thing, which I'll talk about more in the course, is, there's a narrative presented to us that this game of good versus evil is like a game being played on a checkboard. And the game on a checkboard, it has dark squares and light squares, which again, it's like dark makes the move, light makes the move, and it has been so for such a long time. However, it continues to be perpetuated in this way, so we wouldn't wake up into the spiral of ascension, that life is not this, and it's not a grid. It's been perpetuated, it's been kept in motion for so long like this. But the true reality of life is a spiral. It always has been, the emanation of the spiral of life. And hence many of the ancient inscriptions and the artworks, even in the caves, predating all that, were spirals, right, in loops. So we're getting closer with the whole presentation of seeing spirit as a circle, right, as a sphere, and even that is not correct, because we're not beings who are meant to be bred and kept within a specific sphere of existence, and still we're in a locked position, like it's a dome, right? Remember again that these beings, the architects, that's what they are architects. They're creating realities through grids, and imbuing and actually using, because they don't have any life force intelligence, they're using the life force intelligence of intelligent beings, usually starborn beings, through us not being aware of what they do, who they are. Because the moment when, even if an intelligent being incarnates upon Earth, right, you have to go through their system, you have to go through the matrix, which means you're going to be blindfolded just like the rest. You're going to have to use a lot of life force, and your life family will have to get very active to help you to wake up, right, to your true nature, your true potentials, and the nature of true reality is divine. So we're going to have to wake up, and we're waking up through knowing their laws that have been kind of infringed upon us. That's what true awakening is. It's not only awakening to the light and how beautiful Source is, because a lot of people in the spiritual communities, they don't know what they're dealing with. So hence, you don't see a lot of spiritual teachers, New Age teachers, and even gurus, right, talking about that. Why is that? Have you ever asked yourself this question? If these beings are so connected to God, of what they claim to be, why don't they ever mention this? Why don't they ever talk about the matrix, the sphere, the grid, the net, the archons? And yet it's all in the Gnostic. So don't tell me, if they're so wise and so widespread, well-read, well-rounded person, presenting all that they do to others, why don't they ever mention that? And if you're truly a galactic being with galactic consciousness, that means you know yourself from birth to the human inception. You have your memory from your birth as a being when you first came into life, and when you did, you came through specific principles that are divine, right? And so knowing this is then gradually being more and more awake and awakened within us. So naturally, when this starts happening, as it did with me, you become a liability, which means you're a threat to the system, and they start doing these attacks. However, I've been exploring a lot with that, and why would they do that, in terms of a lot of people believing they want to get rid of us or kill us. And in the course, I'll present a different narrative that that's not really the truth, and their intention, and why. You have to use a lot of wit and discernment to understand. And so for me, as an intelligent illumined light being, has been interesting, because the game they wanted to play with me was being played back with them. Not, let's just say, through my human intelligence, but the merging of my human intelligence with my illumined intelligence, which means my entire oversoul, my entire illumined counterpart group working that way. And it's the only way, okay? So it means that just as they're in the awareness of my thought processes, my intentions, my desires, they are able to read them as well. And I share that in one of the channelings that I read, coming directly from my Illumined Light team, and about their intentions and our turnaround. And it's interesting, because even this year, God actually is calling a year of turnarounds and a year of turnovers. So things are not as they look. A lot of people now, with the world events, which I will not comment at this point for reasons I'll explain a little later, there's so much disinformation, and a lot of people are finding themselves in despair and disheartened and thinking it's over, game over, game over. You have to note that this is what the game players, the elite and the globalists, are just few of the players that just continue to perpetuate the evils of different entities that are basically just AI constructs, is different races of beings originating from the archonic stream of life, not the Christ intelligent human narratives of life that we know as, in different realities, they would be different levels of star races, which perpetuate nothing but love, liberty, truth, freedom, the understanding of Source, the Trinity of life, and light is illumined light. One thing that's happening is a lot of people now don't know that things, as they're playing out on the surface of the planet, you have to know this, things playing out that you witness as events, they're events, they're not the truths. So we have to see and observe what's happening in real time, and the events that were being shown either through media, and I'm not going to mention the mainstream media because they're covering up everything, because they're a part of the problems, they're part of the main structures. Just their extensions, nothing else. They're all one. They're all the same in what they're doing, and keeping the game alive, keeping the mask on, although it's, as you know, falling off rather quickly, and people are not as naive and stupid as they would like us to be, or they believe us to be. And still, the surface of things coming out as events is not where the real thing is playing out. You have to know there's operations and missions that go beyond what we see playing out as events, and there's things that we might know about a little later. There's things we might never know about in the physical that took place, and you might only realize that in, let's say, when a specific eon of time passes again, when things make sense. So you have to trust what many people say, trust the plan, because there is a plan. What the false narrative, what the doom and gloom and tyranny narrative is trying to portray to us, I just watched this UFO video today from someone, is that the truth of all truths is that we've wasted all the resources of the planet. There's no other way, there's no other way but to go into AI and technocracy and transhumanism, because this is what it is, right? We're done with. We need to move elsewhere. Earth is no longer for us to live on organically. Don't you see that these are traps? And again, it's a game being played, because the scenario portrayed to us by the media, through the media, if you're not wise and discerning enough, it will want to present a narrative, a reality for you to hook into, instead of you hooking into organic stream life reality. You have to know that with greater intelligence, there's all technology that follows spiritual development, that has the ability to cleanse everything, that has the ability to bring everything back to harmony and not this distortion we know right now. Well, we're continuously told that we are the problem, that humanity is the problem, which is not the truth. It is absolutely the opposite. It is that which is inhumane and not human, right? And what we know as the ET intelligence, but that's the intelligence that is not life intelligence, like various star groups that are pro-life, and they always have been there, they're benevolent, and they're always been of assistance. So this control, by offering us narratives and telling us about the fact of the matter is this and this, such and such, we have to wake up through that. And as well as when it comes to the world events, we have to recognize them, that they're simply events. They're not the truths. And now there's so much disinformation from both sides, both the light and the dark, because, again, this relates to the words that God has given me when I prayed about the situation right now on the planet and how it shall unfold. And, Spirit always talks to me in rhymes, and this is what came through, that it shall all unfold as no one has ever yet foretold. Because, there's a lot of people now claiming these half-truths and saying this will happen or that will happen. You have to know, because these are the signs and these are the messages, so this trajectory and this will happen. You have to know that all of life is watching. Light watches the dark, dark watches the light. Let's just say it like that in a simplistic form. So they would get information. Even people now doing their own personal media and being mediators and their own channels of truths and independent sources or independent media from people. It can't happen the way people foretell it, because the moment you put something out there, it's already visible. So you're making it viable source, right? And it can be used against. So usually these higher ranking missions and operations always occur far from sight, out of sight, which means no one can know. Because the moment you know, you're already observing it, and you're usually telling it out. I'm often observing people who give beautiful information out, and it's very interesting. And I'm still laughing at the fact that, anyone can watch this, so it will change the moves, right? It influences the moves. You have to see the general, higher perspective, which is, we're constantly shown this as the battle of, like I said, dark squares and light squares. And this continues the motion of constant war waging. This has been done through eons of time. All the wars and even all the players, the key players of the roles, have been one and the same person. So if there was someone we're fighting against, that enemy was actually created from the real enemy. It was both one and the same enemy. Because I've talked about this before, the darkness creates the problem and the solution. It's the same thing. It's not just to gain a lot of resources and money and fighting for resources, but it's a lot of other things here too that people don't see because they're so complex, and you have to go way, way beyond, and you need that intelligence. However, now these global events playing out, as we often say, it's a silent war because it's not right down open, and it's not a bloody war, and there's certain things happening because they're trying to prevent war on global scale, like people fighting people, which they're already doing with these fake movements, false movements, and then also rewarding these movements as good, but they're not. They're coming from the same instigator of the problem. As you know, I never talk about specific things in events because it's not about the events themselves. It's about the consciousness of the same perpetuation of the same emotions that have been going on. Not just to be censored, because, you know, I need to protect myself and my life and livelihood too. But the key with me is that I need to stay focused on the Christ and the higher perspective, which is, it's all the same. It's all one pattern applied to everything. While at the same time, right, trying to hide away the most simple repetition of, you know, these spirals of swords that we can see in Brot, what's it called? I don't know the word now. Mandelbrot, right? These fractals. And it was also hidden, saying, no, it's nothing. And it's such a simple equation. It's like a constant emanation of life, replicating itself naturally, organically. While the dark always needs a victim. It needs subjects. You know, in the truth of illumination of Christ, we are all sovereigns. But in this constant perpetuation of that versus that, we're always subjects or victims. Right? And someone's means to an end. So yeah, censorship is real and it's happened to so many people now. But the reason why I don't talk about events and share links and groups and these people who do is, first of all, because anyone can do their own research like I did. I went deep into what's happening. Don't get me wrong. I'm a different kind of Christ. I'm with all levels of life. I go as deep into the event sometimes that I feel guided to do, but then I need to pull it up again into higher spirit because I can see the demonic forces work in a way to keep us distracted from doing the work that is ours, that is genuine, that emanates the most light. So you have to be careful when to go into exploration and data narratives and when to go out, right? Like the jumper, jump in, jump out. So, yes, in that frame, at first I thought maybe I should do a little of the comment in the world's events. And then I thought, first of all, it's not my responsibility. I'm not a commentator. I'm not a spokesperson. I'm not an advocate for specific anything. I'm an advocate of Christ. I'm an advocate of life, of illumined light. And that's my teaching. So I'll remain with that, okay? A lot of people in these New Age communities, they always want to comment the world events and who's who and what's real and what's not. And they lose. You know, they lose the true norm of what's important here. They get sidetracked. Sometimes, and their own fault because they're naive and they're not noticing that pull. Sometimes they're viciously deceived, and not a lot of people are often aware of the deception. I'll talk about that when we get to the course about the keys to liberate. So yes, some people call it the silent war. Some people would say it's informational warfare, but it's truly, as we've talked about before, it's a war over human consciousness, the emanation of life, which we often say it's good versus evil, but in truth it's antichrist versus Christ. And we don't see the even bigger picture playing out, that somehow they need to level out the battlefield. And in this leveling out process, you would say there's casualties and there's things we don't know why it has to get so deep and so dark before there's unification. But let me remind you again, the dark pathway does not want the unification of timelines to occur, because that means that's it. And through many levels and realms, I've talked about this before, the unification has already occurred. Now this last piece of the puzzle playing out on Earth now, and many of the last moves remaining on what we call the checkboard, because before we enter into a spiral, is because here we are, right? I don't know how many of you know the Project Looking Glass, when they discovered this, and how the timelines always end up meeting no matter what takes place. It's all relative to how many moves and who does what, and you can influence that. But beyond the unification, there's no influence, right? I also want to mention something that I'm finding out so interesting, to be so interesting, is what many people call the great C word, right? C-A-B-A-L. I often need to spell it out like that. I was thinking about getting notes. You know, some people do that. They're showing up notes if they can't say the words, because I don't know, anyone can get censored at any time now. Maybe my way of not being censored is I talk too fast, so the algorithms can't like What's she saying here? It's too fast. I can't follow. Check again, But it does happen in my case too. I don't know if you know, but a lot of times when I try to put a video on, it will continuously process endlessly. I have to delete it and try again, which is mind-numbingly annoying and difficult. But also, algorithms are changed in different ways. If you've noticed, I have the same amount of subscriptions since years. I barely get new subscribers. And a lot of these are probably just empty accounts, no longer existing accounts, and that's what I'm seeing. And it is what it is. I'm trying to get the message still across to those who somehow, by miracle of life in Christ, find it. So this C word, right, is that for them, or for this type of consciousness, right now what I'm noticing, I'm observing, and it's funny in a way, is that the most terrifying word for them, and what they're kind of apparently avoiding, even in the medias and discussing, is the whole word. The most dangerous word now, which is basically only one letter, and it's the 17th letter, right? And it's so interesting. Now, all the theories, what that is, who's behind that operation, but it's more about the movement that was started with that, as you know, those of you who've been following up with that. And it's not just happening in the United States, it's global. It's just like those of you who know and have been following with what I've already shared before, that in USA, a major Atlantean timeline is being played out. But it doesn't mean that all of the other parts of the planet are not unified with it, right? There's different timelines being held in different levels. And I'm not going to mention again what people call as now the worst enemy. It also begins with the word C, right? And a lot of people are afraid of that, and it's already happening, right? We know that is to be communism and where it's coming from, the source of it. But it's leading more to totalitarianism, and different states that mean at the end total annihilation of the human species and genocide in a way too, right? So there's different narratives, and we can't get focused and stuck with one just because we see specific events happening. We have to know these are each pieces of the puzzle that somehow need to come together. I know myself, sometimes I get panicked too, and in my human sense, I get worried. What if this happens? I don't want to live on a planet like that. I don't live on a planet where I can't even breathe the air anymore, or this and that. So the thing is now, it's important to stay open, and even with things like, that are being attacked as conspiracy theories, and yet they're not, is be even more observant as to what is the higher meaning beyond them, right? So I looked up to actually the word, sorry, I unplugged my phone, but I looked up the word, the letter. I looked up the letter, and let me share it with you. There was this interesting, I was guided to look it up in the Hebrew way, because that somehow I got an inspiration. And in Hebrew it's called kup, right? I don't know if that's pronounced correctly, but there was an interesting, because I was looking for the meaning, because their letters also had meanings. That's why I was instigated to watch like this. So the pictograph, which looks like a P or a circle with the line going through it, it's called the sun on the horizon, or at the horizon, which is beautiful, right? It's like the dawn of the awakening. And they even call it the Great Awakening movement. So the meaning is circle, revolution, condense, and time. And it said the various meanings of this letter are sun, revolution, circle, and horizon. This letter can also mean condense, as the light gathers at the sun when it is at the horizon. It can also mean time, as the revolution of the sun is used to calculate time. Hebrew, Greek, and Arabic agreed that the sound for this letter is Q. The modern Hebrew and Arabic name for this letter is Kup, apparent root. Right? This is really, really interesting, because when you are inspired, because I kept seeing the number 17 everywhere nowadays, and I said, okay, I'm just going to check more about that. I follow my guidance. And I was thinking about the narratives that people say, it's that, no, it's this intelligence behind it, it's that. But, I had this opening of, what if it's just simply so simple that it is a humanity of the future, which means all the star races, that we also are here in these bodies now, that is what we would say at the quantum level. It's one, it's unified, but it has already the information of what needs to take place for the timelines to be unified, and then it comes, and this intelligence, when our computers and we're databases, and in a way the artificial intelligence base had to exist for us to have computers, the net to be connected, for this to happen, and for us to broadcast specific information about awakening to one another. But at the same time, it also, dark uses it as well. However, I felt it was very important for us to stay open to that as being one of the perspectives, because that's how the truth works. You don't say, this is the truth, this is the truth, that is the truth. You can say, I feel it can be that, I feel that. But we need to remain open with just about anything, because truth, when it comes, let me tell you, there's no doubt. It's just, this either is that or it isn't. There's no in between in actuality. There might be dimensional density perspectives by us. So the more light we absorb, the more we're in that divine intelligence, the truth will shift. But at the core level, the truth is what it is. So the truth is actually where, when we're staying open, right, and we're expanded in probability becoming, potentiality becoming probability, and at the end being inevitable. It is what it is. Okay? So again, about events, being aware, being observant what's happening, especially with the V. Don't do that. Don't get it. I again don't want to talk about it because it's almost like illegal now to talk about these things. And we can also very much get quickly sucked into this whole satanic pull away from the truth. We need to focus on the life, the Christ, the continuous movement of life, the emanation of life through us. And still know the truth for us, what we will broadcast, and speak about it in the platforms that feel that are not censoring us or deleting us and our identity and existence. But also to know what's happening at the level of humanity, which I'll talk about more in that Archonic video, because it's such a deep topic. It really is, and I think I just want to have one whole part dedicated just to that specifically, okay? Because it is about modification of our human God genome, God language of God DNA, and rewriting it. So like I said, just when humanity was about to wake up from that which they were already transgressed at, when their DNA was being spliced and kind of only exist in these two strands, when at the beginning of our being we were not even physical beings, right? We were light beings here. And then the density just kept on being denser and denser as a part of those experiments with life through creationists, which are these, what I call the mad scientists, the different levels of realities. So now they're openly talking about it. You will have these videos from these spokespeople and these politicians who will literally say, this is not a V, right? This is a mRNA modification, which will change the way our nervous system, our central, of course, and peripheral nervous system communicates with the brain, and would eventually plug off that connection, which is natural, and instill these particles in us. And we would operate in a different way. And we'll talk about this in the other segment. So besides that, right, which they're trying to instill, they want to push the narrative of death and destruction, no more life on this planet. It's that we would not connect to the life intelligence of Gaia anymore, and her being as a representative, as it's known in Gnostics, of Sophia, of the mother of life, that which provides us with life. So the keywords to consider here, and those of you who want to go deeper in doing your own research, and of course joining my Patreon team, where I'll be dismantling disseminating, I want to say, a lot of information and how to do that. I've received specific activations. I've received one most beautiful meditative activation I've ever experienced before, and this was after I went through the whole unplugging from the grid, and when I had my final breakthrough that needed to occur in my third eye, which was being manipulated. And so here is so beautiful, because I was working on it for a full week and the results are amazing. And I'll talk about it, and I'll even record it for my Patreon group, but only for the group. Because you know how it is on YouTube. Anyone can watch, there's people who go like, and they don't want to do the work, and it's not what I stand for. There needs to be a communion with Source, with Spirit. There needs to be a sort of devotion to this process. And sometimes even people who are very devoted, sometimes themselves misled. Like one example would be what I recently was shared through Spirit, is people who would only follow scriptures and always read books, and they get so stuck in this books. And what Spirit showed me is that's an old template. We need to kind of move into, we're being moved to the natural intelligence of life. Those of you who want to be directly Christ embodied sovereigns, is like the intelligence is direct. And what Spirit said, those were put into the archives of life at specific days and ages when that was needed. But now, the age of the sovereign human, it's not like AI thinks, oh, you can download instantly. But in truth, through Source, you really can, right? And this is what, if all people knew that, but they also knew it took work because of what was done to our bodies through eons of time, then what most people don't want to do it because they get lazy, they lose interest, they're constantly pulled into other directions, they feel more fun. But what's at stake here? Your soul, your existence, and a lot of these things, and especially this V thing now, it's irreversible. You can't change that. And doctors are speaking about it now, and I'm really grateful this is happening. So there's codes everywhere. And I'm noticing a lot of it now is just downright in the open. You can see these leaders, they're not really leaders, they're puppets, but they are speaking these words are loud, like NWO and DNA modification. They're just saying it, right? Downward saying it because that's how they get our consent. People don't know. And you won't see these things often played out in the mainstream because, but they're still there. So the codes are everywhere and we have to follow up with them and still at the same time be aware, be walking this plane with all due diligence, and be careful of that energetic and informational bombardment because it does the opposite. It kind of reframes our focus and it decomposes us. We need to be as composed as we can in our center and our pillar and not be distracted. And like I said, the body's a priority now. So for me, I was so grateful when the thing and the transgression happened because in a way it moved me more into the body and feeling how the body is so deeply sensitive, vulnerable, but at the same time so powerful that even with as little as that much remaining of that life force, because I was basically robbed of my life force activity and I had a complete adrenal gland exhaustion and burnout due to what happened, right? And the closing off process. And at that point, I wasn't even guided to do any life force channeling through myself because that would just feed that, which hijacked upon me. And only now I'm restarting that slowly. It's a slow process. And yet it can also be at specific point reach fast and catapult us. But it requires work. And anyone who thinks, well, I'm this kind of being, I don't need to do anything because I'm a star being, is very much misled, and they work through the ego to operate the ego in that way. So people who are thinking they're ahead and they're better and they know more, they're going to be most vulnerable to these injections of inception. So we have to be really careful not to get distracted, okay? So the main mission, so how we get from the world events to archons, right? Well, what's behind it all? You have to go deeper all the time. And that's why my work starts at the root of the problem, not with the events. But I'm still with them, if you're following me. So as you know, they create holograms. And I recently watched, was it Alex Collier video, which was so interesting because the video was from 2017 or 2016. It was old, but it was so applicable now. And one of the things, because I don't follow this whole movement, I just know a few things that pop up when I look at other news that I'm subscribed to and I often check. And it's interesting because one of the things that most resonates with me is when they say the future proves the past, right? So it's like always telling us we're already pulling forth. It's like in a way it already happened and we're just watching it playing out. And with the path of least resistance doesn't mean we don't do anything, we just sit back. but with the path of least resistance to that which is trying to distract us, right? So being in this meditative higher state instead of getting too much into the buggy details and lose a sense of what's really happening. Because all the world's a stage, right? We're all mere players. That was already a narrative trying to present to people that, it's just all just a play. Well, yes and no. It's important what's taking place. So, they're creating these holograms, and this in a way how they create this holographic reality. Alex mentioned that this old pyramidal structure system is obsolete, which I really resonated with this. That's why it's no longer functioning, right? It's not coming through on our planet. So through that and through those holograms, and I experienced these when I went into the body and when the body was releasing these vortices, falsely created these grids, they would like embed aspects of them, right? Which is, like I said, a narrative that even Satan wants to know God, somehow wants to understand. But it works in a way that transgresses against life. So a transgression against life is any act through which there is a denial of the sovereignty of the individual, of free will, which is, it trumps everything, according to some of the scriptures through Jesus. And so the main thing with the hologram, right, you have to have a grid, because the grid serves as the system of encoding. So a lot of people that don't know what's been happening with our planet, especially underground the planet with the planetary grid, it's just why these underground channels, bases, tunnels, dumps, as they're calling them, why they were there and what's being performed there. And on top of things above the surface, we have these structures like monuments, churches, important things like the WH, right? You know what that means, right? And there's a lot of things people still don't know that related to trafficking and sacrifice and all that, because it's like encoding and printing the dark timelines. Do your own research, right? I'm not going to talk about that. It's one of the most important planetary problems that it's being pushed through and resolving from the higher echelons of light up to here. And we're receiving a lot of assistance. We just don't know what we see. We don't see, and we want evidence and proof. And it's not out there because it would be too shocking, but it's there. So the Galactic Star Alliance is involved, and they are helping. But there's fake disinformation simultaneously, like fake news. I came across, I have to share this story with you. I came across this channel. I don't know the name now. There was this woman, and she was supposedly... and again, I want to mention something before I tell you the story. When I talk about things like that, I never go for the person. It's not a thing of judgment or criticism. It's like a personal attack. If I ever sound like this, it's attacking the demonic structures that operate through those falsehoods and false light and these bringing all this confusion and half-truths to us, which is not really the truth, right? So this whole fake disinformation news coming through oftentimes in these new age circles. And if I will speak against that, it's not the person doing it, because like I said, in many cases, people are naive. They don't know what they're dealing with. Like a lot of people, they would say, oh, I want to have an ET contact. Boom, they get it. They will manifest it. Be careful what you wish for. But what they manifest is, if they're not in that state of Christhood yet, they're going to manifest something else. And there's going to be a different level of communication coming through. And like I said, not all ET communication is agenda free. You have to be so careful what you're involving yourself with. But I'm sometimes very mad because there's other people who are being pulled into that narrative by someone who's supposedly this self-appointed guru and a figure of speech and a translator for some entity. And you have to be careful, because when you're working with an entity that is not you, your own sovereign self, they will always have an agenda. Even if it's a good one, there's still an agenda. Even my own light team probably has an agenda, and sometimes I feel used in the body, but then I have to remember at the higher level, I somehow agreed upon to all of this to assist, right? But there's difference in benevolent agendas and malevolent agendas. So I came across this channel, and I didn't know how the information is coming through, but I started watching, and at first some of the things felt really nice and appealing, and that's how it usually is, right? To pull you down. And then my plexus area started to constantly create that movement, right? When it's being congested and it's creating this contraction. And so all of a sudden I'm feeling that's something off. And then the information I was receiving was more and more. I was like researching it and was feeling like it's false because it was going deeper into perpetuating the fear, like in confusion. And they were talking about something about the galactics, like about the Alliance Federation and perpetuating the negative timeline, like if they're the problem. And I asked Spirit, I said, is this really truth? Because it doesn't sound like it. And Spirit said, no, it's not the truth. And they were trying to present this narrative like the galactics are the problem and they don't help and they don't assist, and only one team of star, they were like this one race represented, and they're the only ones doing the good thing, and they're the only ones left with the good intention. And so I wanted to see how this person receives the information anyway. So I dug a little deeper, and someone who used to follow also shared with me that they actually just receive it through computer. And I'm like, how? Computer? How? Who? How do you know you're speaking to, and who, and who's behind that? And again, it's using artificial intelligence can work in both ways. So in our most famous and most feared word, right, the 17th alphabetical letter being so feared in the mainstream now because of what it's sharing and red pilling people, it also can be used, this AI platform, to present certain something and narratives and agendas to people who are naive and they don't know what they're feeding. And then they get into this notion of, we need to save, we need to rescue, this needs to be done. And again, this is false. Because rescuing always comes from a state of fear, never through benevolence of Christ. You need to know that. And one more thing, because you need to know infiltration is key and it's present everywhere now. Everything has its turnover. Everything is dual now. We are in this most important duality, pivotal point. It's everywhere. Even the spiritual leaders, which I explained before, and why they never mention and speak about certain things. Some of them, maybe they're either naive or they're not who they say they are. I've seen someone who is a very well-known spiritual figure that spoke about these movements that are now happening because they are coming from the dark side. They're the ones perpetuating these problems and creating the movements to instill more duality and racism and all of that into people. They're not coming from people. And this spiritual person was like, oh, I'm praying for those people and that. And I'm like, wake up. And they're supposed to be leaders in the spiritual circles. And I'm, sometimes I'm like, oh, goodness, And it is what it is. I'm not judging anyone. It's just like sometimes the least, I'm going to say spiritualized people are actually more open to what's happening. And God actually told me that the new movement and revolution will actually start coming through people who were not, who did not have any ideology before. They were not imprinted with a specific something because they're most receptive to, the non-filtered version of what's trying to come through now. And what we might say is aspects of us that already know, and they're unveiling that, and they're telling us it's going to be okay, but we need to play our part, right? And you have to know that those of you who are star-linked and incarnate this way, some beings are chosen to also help with the dissolution of the old timelines that they've dissolved in those realms, that on Earth they were still injected here and they need to be dissolved here as well. So you might have that role. And some people have an active role and they're being active in what's happening with the events, while others are more active in, through their inner works, because that's our source of power. My powerhouse is teaching illumination of the body through what Illumined team calls the cosmic Christ awareness, and how that can come through the body and for us to liberate ourselves. That's my core mission, and to help people ascend, those souls who are ready at this time. And one thing I wanted to talk about, going back to the infiltration and manipulation of information, how can we really check that information? Without a doubt, something that never fails in my realm is that those sources that have a lot of information, and it almost feels like when you start following, it feels like you need more, and it's like it will pull you in. It's not like you watch one thing and it just gives you this sense of peace, and it's good, and it's Even though it's intense, it's still a peaceful feeling. There's love coming through. It's coming through grace. There'll be like this pull. There'll be like push and pull. That's when the belly starts to contract because it knows, it recognizes falsehood. But one other thing, that's a general rule and principle. They never actually mention at all the illumined word, illumination, Christ, golden ascension, organic ascension, you know. And sometimes you need to go back and maybe go more towards the ancient teachings like the Gnosticism, and try to apply these teachings more to your inner perception of reality at this point, because that is the most important thing now. Any narrative, however positive or negative, has the power to disarm us in what we're most powerful with, which is our own experience of life. So when I was almost on my deathbed for so long, I've experienced so many things, and it was like I felt I'm not doing anything. And at that point, I remember Jesus Christ came and he said, sometimes you don't even have to move a finger and your light is emanating. That's how powerful you are. Because I'm still in my own experience, even I think I'm not doing anything, but there's a lot of void created, and that needed to happen in my case, because I can fill up on things rather quickly, and then I need to discharge them again. So remember again those words, the future proves the past. They're really interesting words, right? So quantum computer, right? Humanity from the future, to alter the timelines, to unify the timelines, bring timelines into unified one. That's something that darkness does not want, and it's fearing that. So the efforts of Christ and why they're so persecuted, they continue. And I recently had one very weird comment on my Instagram page where I posted a picture and they said, and it was a false claim because that's not the truth. The claim was, I even wrote it down, the Illumined warrior has no enemies in this world or the next. And it felt like someone is trying to tell me if I'm experiencing all these challenges, I'm not an Illumined warrior, right? It was a very snarky comment, and I felt like, that person does not even know me, does not know what I experience day to day and all the trials I had to go through. And first of all, why do you think there's an image of the Christ put on a cross and everywhere? We have to see it everywhere, in every village. You know, I moved here and there's all these hills, and every tiny hill has a church on it. And every church, what it has is a symbol. And the symbol was a message from them, letting us know that this is what we do to you when you are engaging and embodying the Christ. This is what we do to you, right? We persecute you, put you on a cross. We make you suffer, we make you feel pain. That's what a lot of those of the Christ lineages coming through time and their own star lineages, they've been experiencing tremendous hardship and poverty, and not because they can't create or manifest, but because they've been just trying to struggle to stay alive and to finish what they came here to start. And then if that's not enough, these unawake people try to give us, the benefit of the doubt as if they know. Okay, it's a really nice thing to do. When you are truly aware, you don't know the full story. You don't know that person. You don't know their intelligence. You don't know where they come from. You don't know their being, especially when you don't even know yours, right? So it continues to be the mission of the Christ to continue with its life force cultivation and liberation of the physical body. So that's what I will focus on again on Patreon now that I'll be more active. There's, like I said, one mini course coming, and I'll share my experience, what I had to go through and endure with these inception points and vortices and implants. Maybe it helps some of you who are also doing the work, and I also want to share some of the insights what these beings are truly up to, and not a lot of people know, and I think it's safe for us to know. We need to know. So that will be continued there. Also in that, I'll explain much more of the mission of Jesus in relation to the fall of Sophia, which is, the fall of life into this density, and the archons. And that will be shared more there. So that's it for now. I just want to share a few last important messages. As you know, due to all the censorship, I don't know where things are leading, not even with Patreon. I don't know now. The world is a weird stage, as you can see. And because of what I noticed, and using this platform for a while now to have phone sessions, Telegram became so close to me, and I've heard so many beautiful things about it. It's not censored. It does not take data from people. It does not spy on people. So there's a lot of newness that came through, and I actually created this Telegram group to broadcast messages and do typing messages, which I used to put on Instagram a while ago, long ago. And Instagram just doesn't resonate with me anymore. I don't even know if I'm going to keep it. I really don't know, because I used to love photography and putting my pictures there, and sometimes oracles, put little messages of illumination. And when you know who's behind Instagram and all these things, I've already left Facebook, as you know, it just makes you, be appalled by everything. And the worst thing about Instagram, when you join in and you come on the first front page, there's always these silly things there, totally superficial content, and sometimes even naked teenagers doing these dances, and I'm thinking, what the heck is this? Who propagates this? Who allows this in the first place? And this other app, I don't even know, TT, what it is. I don't even use it, never used it, never want to. And the thing is, there's so much bombardment, not just with this and that, but also the superficial content, and it keeps us in this low state and not evolving our activity of the clear cognizance and developing our brain into being more connected with the heart and the gut, the three brains we have, the correlation. So I created this Telegram group in which I can do more messages now. I only mentioned it on my Patreon, and it's going to be shared down below, but just in case, some people are like, where's the box? Well, it's right there. You just have to open it up below the video, but it's https as always, and it's t.me, like Telegram me, /Ascension Pioneers. Very simple. I also created a group, but this will be just for my beautiful devotees. It's discipleship group from a continuation of my Patreon work and Illumined Ascension work. That's how the group is called, and it's private. So there's new platforms coming through. I don't know yet which one. I'll create probably one of these. I don't know how many are, how well used they are. There's a few of them. I think Rumble, UG2, BitChute, Odyssey, some of these. I don't want to have a few. I just want to have one. So I have not had the time to do any internet kind of detective work, and I was bedridden. I'm still experiencing massive cleanse and detox at this point, which I'll talk about on Patreon. But there are new things, and I don't yet know, but I want to create one of these. I don't yet know the name, but let me tell you this, in case one day, if I'm ever just off, that was not from me, I really hope that, I keep praying to the divine that my channel stays, because, no matter who's behind it, I started my work here, and I think we also need to use these platforms at times. The light needs to embed itself within the dark. It's not just, let's just move away and forget about it. We need to understand there needs to be union, needs to be a harmonious understanding of everything. So I will create one of these. So if one day I'm just off, try to find me. I'll use the same word, Ascension Pioneers, together with capital letters, right? If I do. If someone else takes the domain, then it's not going to be that. That's fine, because sometimes there's people, they're like, oh, she's not going to get that. It might be something else, and maybe I'm doing this as disinformation. You don't know, right? Have not heard from me. All I'm saying is I will eventually do that, and I will inform you, maybe already in the next video, just in case. So that's where it will all continue. I will not upload the content from before, because God knows I don't even have it on computer. That's obviously a lot. There's almost 1,000 videos now, except from the courses I do have. I kept those, Yeah, so funding was an issue for me now, because I couldn't work for so long. So my funds have dropped. My support has dropped a lot. I was very saddened about this. Even on Patreon, people just were leaving, and very few ones who always are there, and I'm so grateful and thankful for these beautiful supporters. But as you know, because of what happened recently, and it's continuously happening, there's like this division, and when we do currency rate exchanges, we're losing a lot of money. But who profits, right? And we already get taxed if we have a platform. Let's say it's Patreon, we get taxed there. Not just me, but the users, right? And then you need to withdraw the funds. You need to create currency conversion, which I have to because I'm in Europe. I'm using euros if I want to, get paid and supported in my life. And then the PayPal also subtracts the money, and then on PayPal they also take the provisions, and we also know where that is from, but unfortunately it is what it is. Like I said, light needs to work within dark at this point. And then you convert everything, and once you get the outcome of your money, it's like half less. It's a really sad process for now. There's new things being implemented, and this reset that's now being spoken about. Everyone who's a globalist keeps affirming this word, that it gets into people's subconscious, like, oh, we need a reset. Well, of course we need it. But who created these conditions, right, in the first place? They did. So we need to get really close with each other, and we need to know that if we want to continue towards the path of ascension, we also need to support that. Because in the end, I always say it's important. I know people are using their funds for the fundamentals like food and that sustenance, but in the end, right, it's just food. I always say, for me, I'm in a different being. I know I can't compare myself with anyone. Like, I would rather have my connection to source and to ascend than have food. I mean, either way, I have to. I mean, my light being is first. I'm not going to get imprisoned anywhere. And I know that even the words we hear, prison planet, in a way they're not truth. Like, there's a version of that, yes. But once you're on the other side and you're liberated from that, you can live in a free planet. There's a shift. And this is where we're now, in between. So my mission is to assist souls to liberate themselves from this hold of the controllers who think they need to monitor our evolution. They think they can press the button and create reset when they want, create a DNA change whenever they want, and it's for humans to start utilizing their divine royalty that they are, right? Which in many cases you've already heard we are, because we have interstellar intermingling DNA coming through so many star races. And that which is most dominant is also coming through our soul, because the soul then infuses through the body, which has its own ancestry and story, and that the soul has its DNA ancestry, DNA of the light. And it's not like scientists say the DNA is just a physical thing. That's a hoax. It's not the truth. First, we have light DNA, and we have different ways of frequencies that create that. There's like weavings and emanations, and it has been really distorted, and it's almost like we'd be put in a tiny little box when we're like this. And so, like I said, my mission continues to be to pave the way for this golden organic Christ ascension, to hold the gates. I've received a lot of information about what that is, what in this timeline, and how it's connected with the trine of the cosmic Christ. And again, I only share that on Patreon for the advanced content. I'll talk about much more, as well as the implants and the scalar waves and the rainbow chamber of light, which is an Arcturian principle. Just amazing things I've been going through in the past few months. So that will all be there. And on YouTube, we're going to do the liberation course, and knowing these things and these vortices, knowing more about archons. If you want to get prepared, try Googling some of the Gnostic teachings about the archons. Just do your own research. I don't want to say Googling anymore, because I don't want to use that as that's the only way of us browsing for things, I just want to say web search it, right? So if you want to in any way support my calling, my mission, which is an endless sacrifice and effort, you can do so, and I thank you for doing so. You can use the bottom description, which is always shared that. It's the pay me link that's direct, or the icon on the general YouTube channel, which, there's a few icons of the work you do and connections to pages. And so that's really, really, really necessary this time, because, I was contemplating on that a lot, and I thought, if this eventually just ends completely, that means my time's run out. And that means it's time to leave the planet. And I don't know how many people feel they still feel benefit coming from my content, and some people tell me they do. Some people couldn't care less. It's always been like that, as you know. It really depends where the evolution of the being is. But I would advise you, if you do want to hold the best intentions for what the Illumined team has planned, you would also, invest at least a little bit of that, because our life is not just feeding us food. It's very important, but we don't get all our sustenance from food. And this is not a propaganda for you not to eat. Please don't get me wrong. Please don't get me wrong, because so much of what people say is being misinterpreted. Everyone needs to be provided first physically, yes. But I'm saying is we're going towards levels of our advancement where we're going to need to release and that firm grip which we have for so long, like how much physical we are and we think we need, like so stuck on the physical. So the whole liberation act is an art of liberation from the materialistic plane, not the same as the physical plane. The physical plane of reality is not bad because it provides a playground for life, and there's different levels of physicality, right? And different levels of dimensional densities. But we're here still entrapped in a very materialistic sense of physicality that the liberation of the human soul is pulling out of. And there's unification of timelines, trying to get as many souls pulled out into this spiral of ascension as possible at this time, although you can't do that with someone who doesn't even know what that is, right? And slowly there's these adjustments. And I want to say that also our illumined light intelligence does not always share or give out all the information at once. Even to us, it's the same as in rule of all the war. Don't give the information out. Let's keep the both sides distracted. So I don't always get all the information too, because if I speak about something when it's not time yet, or it would get me in danger or something, that means that nope, it's not going to come. Because the divine intelligence knows, and it always shares that which is most vitally important. And that's why you have to know I share certain things here and certain things only in Patreon. And if that platform ever is compromised too, I'm going to find another way. I don't yet know. And if that is over, then, my source connection will tell me. That's it. I've done the most as I could. It's no longer the optimal to stay here. It's time to move on and assist from the other sphere of reality, which in many cases, people don't know, it's not death. It's just a different stage of the journey. And to be honest, I felt a lot of that coming. And that, in my case, in my example, it needs to be like this, because there are certain things, what I feel about this mission, that I won't be able to fulfill until I'm on the other side, which is what ascension is. And pulling from that other side those who would be invested in that, as through my powerful spirit presence of Aurea, which is what I can't always do, what is still in the physical. It's still kind of captive for me. That's what was difficult for me, because I've expanded so much through the years, and it felt like the body just, at the level where it is now collectively, it doesn't provide me for what I feel I really, really could do. So I think when that time comes, I would know it, and I would share it with you. So in case I ever just leave, or something gets deleted, it's not me. Just leaving without a hey, it's other things like censorship. So the last thing I want to do for today is I want to share 3 messages. Oh, there are actually 4. I didn't know that. One additional one. And I asked the divine to give us some beautiful messages. Like I said, God calls this the time of resurgence. And there's a lot of things and twists and turns that, they're meant to be secret until it's time for us to know. But the message that I asked for specifically was angelic guidance about some of the things that are most important themes in this year. For me, this was an ongoing theme last year. So what I believe is a lot of souls are going to go the way that they need to go, which is something I already experienced and I'm now in finalization of before I move into the body illumination stage. And the body illumination stage is actually the same as ascension. It's the ascension of the body, and it's not instant or immediate. The body needs to be at the level of vitality you can actually do that, and I'm not there now, so I know I require a lot of work. And the teaching times are going to have to be, step aside when that will be most important. But this is the message. It's called transformation. It's kind of like the liquidization process, like the liquid light moving through the intelligence of the illumined body, or the illumination of the body process. The next one is raise your vibration. This is, like I said, this requires that. And it's not just like that new age, shift your vibration, think positive. It's the actual work with the spiral of Christ light. And one of the most important things I'm doing for that now is the meditation I channeled after the move. And I'm doing it almost every day now, and it's amazing. And like I said, I'll share it on Patreon for now. And the last one is this one. I think a lot of you will be happy about this one. It's called Angelic Protection. And it really feels amazing because no matter what humanity is experiencing, we still have so much benevolent support, love, compassion. We don't always see it. It has to stay this way because it has to be an inner built system of trust, a priority for us. Yeah, but it's there. And the last one was an additional message from the Christ, which is follow the path that is right for you. So like I said, not all of us are here to know every single thing, to be out with every single event. But some of us have a more inward path that is an emanation that broadcasts outwardly in an amazing way. I've been writing many articles on my Telegram Messenger channel, which I shared with you before. And it says here, God blesses those who patiently endure testing and temptation. That's been my whole last 2 years. And this third one, I guess, is just continuing. It is an intense year. A lot of people fear because of the whole agenda that what had this date on it this year. Please just don't fear. A lot of us sometimes feel that call, like, ugh, the grip within us, and still we need to know that there's something of a greater nature behind all of it, and that there's what's happening now is a lot of people can't understand why things unfolded the way they did currently, especially in the US. And what I received from Source was that people need to see what's happening, and there's no other way but that to be put in the spotlight, for the mask to drop off, and people to start realizing how corrupt everything is and was, and what are some of the most heinous things happening on the planet, and why, to keep the grids of the planet aligned with this blood-related and sacrifice-related things of, nefarious natures, satanic, Luciferian. And I'll talk more about that again in my groups and Patreon. I hope you will look forward to the course. It's going to get really, really intense because I'll share probably everything that I've been experiencing. And the funny thing is I have it all here. I don't have it all written down because I was not in a state to even write my journal, because I always do, and all this automatic writing. But still, everything's here, and it will be discharged powerfully. I'm very anxious. I'm always like this. Until I discharge what I need to, I feel like agitated. I feel like I can't live until I just get it out. This is something that keeps me going. It's just a part of what needs to take place. And the only thing I do require still is for me to stay physical, to have the support. I know it sounded funny what I was using with my words before, but again, the only thing I wanted to say is we need to invest in other things, just physical things. But of course, physicality and our nourishment and support of that is first. It's a top priority, of course, for us. Same for me as for all of you. But I'm just saying, if you value the work, please consider putting your mark of love and appreciation and do energy exchange. And thank you for doing so much. But I'm the happiest when people actually join the Patreon team to get informed, to get the updates, and to start learning how to liberate the body and move on and ascend. Thank you for being here, and I would like to wish you a happy 2021. Not a happy one, but a discerning, a sovereign, and honest year, full of integrity and being what we're truly here to be as the cosmic Christ. Extensions of life, as life itself, as beautiful human beings here, and aspects of us that are not earth-based. So thank you for joining, and as always, so much love, wisdom, and power, and so much love to all of you. I love you. Take care.